If you're hooked on Marvel Cosmic Invasion and feel like you finally found that beat 'em up that makes you want to play just one more level every night, I have an absurd list of games for those who love stylish brawling, couch co-op, satisfying combos, and that feeling of clearing the screen with your fists. So hit that like button, grab your favorite team, and come with me. I'm Matthew, and the video starts right now. If you enjoyed Marvel Cosmic Invasion for the flavor of a modern beat-em-up, stylish and made for replayability, Absolum is one of those games that feels like a natural continuation of that addiction, but leaning more towards roguelite with its own fantasy world and very technical combat. Absolum sells itself as Dotemu's original Rogue 'em up, blending 2D brawling with modern roguelite elements, and you can feel that proposal right away. The structure encourages runs, varied encounters, and multiple paths, so every attempt feels like just one more go, and we know how that ends. The setting is Talem, a world that collapsed after a magical cataclysm, where the Sun King Azra uses the fear of magic to justify oppression, the enslavement of mages, and the conquest of kingdoms, the perfect foundation for a beat-em-up. It's you against an entire regime using nothing but your fists. And the coolest part is that the heroes have mechanical personality, not just visual. Galandra is described with the colossal sword and necromantic powers. Carl is a dwarf of blunderbuss and fist with an explosive style, and then there's Broma Molai Mage who fights with a staff, ranged magic, and even a hoverboard-like slide, and Cider, an agile shooter with a more mysterious vibe. Now, the point where Absolum really wins me over, and where I think fans of Marvel Cosmic Invasion will freak out, is the promise of combat that demands precision. Fast combos, magic, rare items to turn the tide of battle, counters, and a focus on mastering the system. Plus, it has solo or co-op modes to fit that coordinated chaos with a friend.
Taking back our land.
If you enjoyed Marvel Cosmic Invasion for the fantasy of arriving, clearing the screen, and feeling like a hero, Streets of Rage 4 is the game that delivers that exact same energy but with a more grounded, grittier brawling style that is simultaneously absurdly refined in its sense of impact. It's a modern beat-em-up with a retro soul, the kind that makes you want to play just one more stage. And before you know it, the whole night is gone. What really gets me here is how the combat seems simple on the surface, but becomes increasingly addictive as you understand the rhythm. Positioning, crowd control, throws, using the environment, and especially combo construction. There's a lot of freedom to chain sequences, use the corner of the screen to extend combos, and turn a regular fight into a spectacle of control and timing. It's one of those games where you finish a fight and think, okay, that looked beautiful, and then comes one of the smartest touches: specials still exist. But now they force you to negotiate risk and reward. Because using a special costs health, and that health can be recovered if you manage to land hits without getting hit back immediately. This completely changes the mindset. Instead of saving specials as a panic button, the game nudges you to play aggressively and stylishly, as if saying, go ahead, trust your control. For me, it's this system that gives Streets of Rage 4 that depth many people don't expect from a beat-em-up. Visually, it also has a seasoning that reminds me a lot of the appeal of a good superhero game. Vivid colors, strong lines, hand-drawn animations, and effects that make every hit look like it has real impact. It's a game where the visuals aren't there just to be pretty, they converse with the aggressiveness of the combat and make every punch feel heavier than it would with simpler sprites. And if your vibe with Marvel Cosmic Invasion is gathering people and turning the session into a party of controlled chaos, Streets of Rage 4 shines on that front too. You can play co-op, and the game has extra modes like Arcade and Boss Rush for those who want to test their mechanical mastery. The best compliment you can give it is that it respects what makes a beat-em-up so direct walk and punch, but adds enough layers for you to feel like you're genuinely improving with every attempt. Nine Monkeys of Shaolin is a beat-em-up developed by Sobaka Studio and published by Buka Entertainment and Ravenscourt, and its proposal is very straightforward: modern brawling with a classic feel. The starting point is almost a cliche that works. You play as Wei Cheng, a fisherman who sets out for revenge after a tragedy, and this gives a narrative push that fits the journey vibe perfectly. I like it because the game doesn't try to be huge or full of fluff. It puts you in rapid motion, always with the feeling of advancing to the next confrontation. In terms of gameplay, what won me over was the idea that it's not just light punch, heavy punch, special, and done. It tries to be a bit more sophisticated in the way you fight and build your combat rhythm. And there's a seasoning I find very clever for those who like to feel evolution. The game has 3 fighting styles: ground, air, and mystical powers. And the fun lies in combining these layers to keep the combat varied. In practice, this gives that feeling of my character is becoming more complete, because you switch approaches, sometimes more technical, sometimes more aggressive as the screen fills up and enemies put the pressure on. It also has a cooperative mode, so you can turn the campaign into a duo brawling session, which is exactly the kind of thing beat-em-up lovers usually look for after beating a game and wanting more of the same, but different. If your passion in Marvel Cosmic Invasion is the spectacle and the flow of combat, here the spectacle is different. Less superpower and more kung fu choreography, with an atmosphere leaning towards classic 70 seconds movies. Asterix and Obelix slap them all. 2 is a beat-em-up with an original story, varied environments, and animated scenes that tie the adventure together in a way that suits Asterix and Obelix. Confusion, travel, and a lot of people getting slapped. The story hook grabs me right away because it feels like a classic episode from the comics. The Eagle of Lutetia is stolen, an innocent man is imprisoned, and the duo sets out to investigate, passing through places like shadowy forests, vast Roman camps, and Lutetia itself. I enjoy it when a beat-em-up gives you this perfect excuse to travel through different environments, because it avoids that feeling of, I'm walking to the right in the same place forever. Here, the journey is part of the charm, and the humor of the universe helps keep everything light even when the screen turns into chaos. In combat, the fun is that it tries to go beyond the basics. You can charge certain moves, the game promises more dynamic and fluid fights, and it even includes a fury mode and an exclusive ultimate attack for each character. This is the kind of thing that, in practice, changes how you play. You start controlled, fill up the bar, and when you activate Fury Ultimate, it feels like the game gives you permission to go overboard without guilt. And since you can interact with the environment, destroy elements, and throw things like barrels or even menhirs, that power fantasy becomes much more fun. The visuals are also one of the points that draw the most attention. It has a style very faithful to the comics, with strong colors and a very polished 2D finish, the kind that makes you want to keep looking at the background of the stage. I like this type of aesthetic because it suits beat-em-ups. Quick readability of the action, expressive characters, and visual impact in the hits without needing realism. It's a game that wants to be beautiful and light at the same time, and that helps keep the rhythm enjoyable for long stretches. And for those who like to play with company, which is usually half the fun in a beat-em-up, it has 2-player co-op, so you can turn every stage into a session of laughs and coordinated chaos. Treachery in Beatdown City is basically a beat 'em up that works like a tactical RPG. You walk around the screen, encounter an enemy, the game pauses, and you build combos by choosing attacks from a menu, almost like Fallout's V. A, T, S, but with punches, kicks, and grabs. The system forces you to think before acting. Each character, Brad, Lisa, or Bruce, has specific strengths and weaknesses. Striker, grappler, or support, and you need to look at the enemy type and choose who will fight. This changes everything. You can't simply mash buttons until you win. You need to land the right combo, manage your FP bar, which replenishes slowly, deal with negative statuses like bleeding and blindness, and still worry about counterattacks if you try to grab an enemy with a full health bar. It's one of those games that requires more brains than reflexes, and this can be frustrating or addictive depending on what you expect from a beat 'em up. The story is also a strong point and very different. President Blake Orama has been kidnapped by ninjas, and it's up to 3 street fighters from the outskirts to save him while facing gentrifiers, racist tech bros, angry bikers, and aggressive security guards. I love how the game uses every confrontation to make a very sharp social critique, gentrification, casual racism, class arrogance, all wrapped in a thick layer of dark comedy and dialogue full of one-liners worthy of an action movie. It's a game that isn't afraid to be political and funny at the same time, and that gives a unique charm to every cutscene before the fights. Visually, and in terms of pacing, it also breaks the mold. It has that pixelated aesthetic inspired by 90 Seconds New York, graffiti on the walls, trash on the street, unpleasant people everywhere, and combat happens in a side view like Double Dragon, but everything is pausable. This takes away a bit of that continuous frenzy adrenaline you get in traditional beat 'em ups, but replaces it with an almost puzzle-like sensation. Building the perfect combo, hitting 2 enemies at once, stealing an opponent's weapon and using it against them. When it works, it's extremely satisfying, like setting up a chess move that ends with a suplex. Dragon's Crown Pro is the remastered version of Vanillaware's Beat 'em Up, keeping the core of the original while adding modern presentation upgrades. It brings refined art with 4K support and includes options like English and Japanese voice acting and a re-recorded soundtrack with orchestral arrangements with the option to switch to the classic BGM if you prefer. The most interesting part is how it mixes medieval street brawling with character progression. You choose between 6 very different classes, and each one completely changes the rhythm of combat, positioning, and even their role in the team. And when I say different, I mean different. There are characters focused on range, support magic, heavy spells that need recharging. It makes you want to test them all just to feel the variety in your hands. You can tackle the stages with up to 4 players, or fill the slots with AI-controlled partners, and the chaos on screen turns into that organized mess that only a good beat 'em up delivers. Add to that the equipment loop, and you enter just one better drop mode, because finishing a run and seeing the pile of loot is still one of the most pleasurable feelings in the genre. And the extra seasoning for me is the vibe of a fantasy campaign with an arcade feel. Stages with imposing bosses, attack patterns that require reading and timing, and a classic adventure atmosphere that fits perfectly with long sessions. In the end, it's that type of game you start for the absurd visuals and stay for the addictive combat plus progression. Exactly the kind of combo that hooks anyone who loves co-op brawlers.
Filthy lucre.
Castle Crashers Remastered is that type of chaotic beat 'em up that takes the idea of group brawling and takes it all to a totally unhinged medieval cartoon, almost as if they took a nonsense comic strip and turned it into a game. The premise is simple. A dark wizard steals a mystical crystal, kidnaps 4 princesses, and throws the entire kingdom into chaos. and you step in as one of the colorful knights to go out smashing everything that appears on screen until you bring order back to the castle. It's the kind of game where the story is almost silent, without walls of text, but every animation, every character expression, and every ridiculous situation tells you exactly what is happening. What grabs you right away is the sense of progression mixed with the chaos of combat. Castle Crashers is a 2D beat 'em up with simple to understand combos, but it gets tastier as you level up and unlock new attacks, magic, and stat upgrades. At every level, you distribute points into strength, defense, magic, and agility, so it's easy to build your knight spect for what you like, whether it's exploding the screen with magic or becoming a fast punching machine. For those who enjoyed building teams and synergies in Marvel Cosmic Invasion, there's a mini RPG going on behind the humor here that makes you want to restart just to test another configuration. Now, where Castle Crashers really shines is in multiplayer. Up to 4 players on the same screen, local or online, comboing hordes of enemies gives off that couch energy of arcade classics, but turbocharged with 60 frames per second and high definition visuals in the remastered version. It's the perfect game to gather the crew, turn off your brain, and laugh at the absurd things happening. From gigantic bosses to enemies getting sick in the background while the brawl rages on. When the stage ends and the game forces you and your friend to fight each other for the princess's kiss, you can feel the soul of that cheeky PvP that fighting game and Brawler fans love. Another detail that really speaks to those who liked Marvel Cosmic Invasion is the variety of characters and arsenals. In Castle Crashers, practically every enemy you encounter has a chance to become a playable character later, each with their own magic and slight style differences. Plus, there are dozens of weapons and the famous animal orbs, floating pets that give specific bonuses like more strength, defense, magic, or speed. This gives the game absurd replay value. You finish it once and immediately start thinking, okay, now I'm gonna beat it using that other knight and that pet that buffs agility. Castle Crashers Remastered is the type of game that aged well precisely because it never took itself seriously. The hand-drawn art, the toilet humor, the creative bosses, and the mix of beat 'em up with RPG progression make it still feel fresh, even after so many years. The remastered version gives it that missing polish, with better textures, unlocked frame rates, and an extra mini-game. So if you're coming from Marvel Cosmic Invasion and want another game focused on frenetic combat, character building, and group chaos, Castle Crashers Remastered is practically mandatory in your library. Mayhem Brawler is that kind of game that, if you enjoyed the stylish brawling and chaos of Marvel Cosmic Invasion, you need to test at least once. It's an urban fantasy beat 'em up with a 90 seconds comic book vibe, full of superpowers, corrupt police, wolves, mages, supernatural creatures, and a world where it feels like there's always something wrong happening on every corner. The feeling is very much that of sitting on the couch, grabbing the controller, and simply going out to beat down everything that appears, but with a modern veneer that makes everything more fluid and beautiful. The structure is classic. You choose between 3 main characters, each with their own style. The brute who hits hard, the more agile character, and the balanced one. And advance stage by stage, clearing streets, alleys, docks, labs, and other urban settings full of enemies. However, unlike many generic beat-em-ups, Mayhem Brawler plays with elements of special powers and statuses, so it's not just button mashing. There are moments to think about positioning, when to spend a special, and how to control the crowd of enemies without turning into ground meat in the middle of the screen. A detail that gives the game its own seasoning is the choice system at the end of stages. You finish a mission and can decide which path to follow, which changes the next stage and leads to branches in the story. It's nothing super complex on an RPG level, but for a beat 'em up, It's enough to give that feeling of, okay, on the next run, I'll see the other path and increase replayability, especially if you enjoy experimenting with different routes and seeing all the boss encounters. It's almost as if you were flipping through a comic book and deciding which page to turn. In gameplay, what stands out is how the hits have impact and how the game encourages you to play beautifully. Aerial combos, use of dash, blocking, something not every brawler has, and specials that fill the screen. All this means that when you land a smooth sequence, it gives that satisfaction of, okay, I've mastered the rhythm of the street here. You can play solo, but it really shines in co-op because the shared chaos with 4 people raining blows on all sorts of supernatural creatures is exactly the kind of organized mess that fans of Marvel Cosmic Invasion tend to like. Mayhem Brawler strongly embraces the comic book style. Thick lines, vibrant colors, onomatopoeias on screen, and characters with designs that look like they came straight out of an urban fantasy comic series. The soundtrack joins the same vibe, holding down that atmosphere of a dangerous night in the city, but with the energy of a street hero team springing into action, which fits perfectly with the idea of patrolling the city and maintaining order your way with your fists. If Marvel Cosmic Invasion hooked you with its mix of superpowers, chaos, and style, Mayhem Brawler is like the direct brawling version of that. Fewer projectiles on screen, more elbows to the chin. The TakeOver is that beat 'em up that looks like it came straight from the same mental shelf where Streets of Rage, Final Fight, and of course, the more urban side of Marvel Cosmic Invasion sit. If you like the idea of beating down a stylish gang with modern visuals, flashy combos, and the atmosphere of a crime-ridden city, this is practically a love letter to the 90 Seconds classics, but with visual steroids and some very interesting ideas of its own. The story takes place in Steelhaven, that metropolis on the US East Coast that's doomed from the start. Gangs taking over the streets, overwhelmed police, and a kidnapping that becomes the spark for the trio of protagonists to go out sweeping criminals from neighborhood to neighborhood. You choose between 3 main characters and unlock 1 more later, each with their own rhythm, reach, and way of hitting, which already makes you want to replay stages to feel how each one fits in your hand. Everything is tied together by comic-style cutscenes, so the game has that B-action movie look, but with its own charm. In gameplay, it embraces the classic formula of walking right and clearing the screen, but gives you enough tools to feel in control of the chaos at all times. Separate buttons for punch and kick, grabs, aerial attacks, an invincible special, and even a super that clears the entire screen when the bar fills up. Plus, each character has a firearm with limited ammo, which serves as a tactical option to control annoying enemies from a distance, and a rage meter that, when activated, makes you faster, stronger, and invincible for a while, almost like a beat-em-up berserk mode. One thing that makes the TakeOver look much more like a complete package is the variety. There are 7 stages with over 20 different areas, and the game constantly throws special stages in your face to break the routine. There's a car chase on a highway with a time limit, a shooting stage in a temple with a mutant zombie using an infinite machine gun, and even a section clearly inspired by Afterburner, which completely changes the perspective and gives you that feeling of playing a different game for a few minutes. Along with this come arcade, survival, challenge, and practice modes. So if you enjoy mastering the combat system, there's plenty of room to refine combos, test routes, and see how far you can last in street endurance. The game strongly embraces stylized 3D with dramatic lighting, lots of neon colors, explosions, and a camera that tilts slightly at times, almost as if it were an interactive digital action movie. The soundtrack pulls directly from that modern electronic vibe inspired by the 80 seconds and 90 seconds, which matches perfectly with the Marvel Cosmic Invasion vibe. You are always in the middle of a city on the brink of collapse, but with a small team of extremely competent people resolving everything with precise beatdowns.
Nice.
Slaps and Beans 2 is a love letter to the comedies of Bud Spencer and Terence Hill, full of sharp slapping sounds, absurd bar fights, comedic timing, and situations so exaggerated that you play smiling almost the entire time. The campaign continues the vibe of the first game straight away. After a shipwreck in Africa, the two save a village from criminals and try to return home on a raft loaded with bananas. Obviously, nothing goes right. And this becomes the perfect excuse for a brawling road trip across various settings inspired by the classic movies. The story has that crazy adventure rhythm, full of improvised escapes, swindlers, megalomaniacal generals, and wild plans, always with the duo's chemistry at the center of everything. In gameplay, it maintains the traditional beat-em-up, base walk, hit, grab, throw, but works well with the protagonists' personalities. Bud is heavier, full of high-impact blows, and Terence is more agile, with stylish animations and that manner of someone who fights while taking the mickey. The combat system has been refined compared to the first one, with signature special moves, unique power-ups, and a fight flow that always tries to feel like a movie scene, not just a bunch of enemies entering the screen without context. Something that fits very well with those who enjoy chaotic cooperative games like Marvel Cosmic Invasion is the variety of mini-games and group modes. Besides the campaign, there is a mode focused solely on mini-games for up to 4 players, where you compete for high scores and activities inspired by the nonsense situations of the movies, which turns the game into a great party brawler to play for laughs with friends. Slaps and Beans 2 strongly embraces the cartoon style with modern pixel art, but without abandoning that urban Western atmosphere that defines the duo. The animations for slaps, punches, and falls are full of exaggeration, the environments have lots of details, and the humor is visual all the time, so even if you aren't a hardcore fan of the movies, the comedy brawler vibe is very easy to enjoy, especially if you already like seeing superpowers, chaos, and charisma in Marvel Cosmic Invasion and want something lighter, accessible, and focused on laughs and local co-op.